Hey everybody, this is Will here. I'm a developer advocate at Miro. Welcome to our first developer Q&A session. So today we got some feedback, or over the last couple of weeks actually, we solicited feedback from you all, part of our community, to see what kinds of topics you'd like to see discussed here in developer Q&A going forward. And we got some great suggestions, such as going over our roadmap or going through migration resources. As you know, we've recently launched our V2 developer platform. So today, these are a few of the topics I'm going to cover here quickly. I'm recording this session, so I'll send it out afterwards, so you can watch it whenever works for you. But yeah, with that, I'll just kind of dive right in. So for those of you who might be less familiar with Miro, this is our developer portal, lives at developers.miro.com. And the first thing I'd like to go over is our roadmap. So we have a public-facing roadmap that you can access here at the top of our docs. And this is a great place to come to get a sense of what things are, highly requested, what's in progress, what's been released recently, and it's split up between, general, our web SDK, and our REST API. So if you're ever wondering, am I the only person who thought it would be helpful to have metadata or something like that? This is a very, useful thing to check out. Hey Daniel, thanks for joining. Great to see you.
Hey Will, how's it going?
Good. I was just going over a quick kind of review of our roadmap. I don't know if you've seen this before, but this is where people can submit feature requests and new ideas. And you can also see where people have, upvoted the most highly requested features. But it's also a great place to check out what's currently being worked on and prioritized for our web SDK and REST API. So I'm just kind of going over here a quick summary of these items. Basically, lines and connectors are a top priority for our REST API, and actually they'll be coming out as an experimental endpoint very soon, within the coming weeks, so people can start playing around with those. And that's been a pretty highly requested feature. You can see at least 15 people here have requested that. From the web SDK side of things, the option to toggle the panel pinning and CRUD lines connectors are also things that are being worked on. But yeah, this is just kind of high level, how we use the roadmap and where you can come to see what's been recently released, what's requested, or request your own. The other thing I was going to cover today is migrating from V1 to V2. So we have a specifically dedicated section of our developer documentation called guides, and this is where all of our migration resources live under the resources tab here. So for those of you who aren't aware, we are going to be retiring our V1 platform at the end of the year. So at some point everyone will need to migrate to V2, and that encompasses the web SDK and also the REST API. So one thing I want to point out here is our migration resources are very comprehensive, but there are a few different guides depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Generally, as you migrate from V1 to V2, you're going to want to leverage probably all of these guides, or if you're just using the REST API, just these guides here. But there is a difference between the comparison guide and the reference guide for each. So I just wanted to quickly cover that. And then any open questions for you, Daniel, or if anyone else joins as well. So the comparison guide is intended to be a kind of higher level overview of the major functional and structural differences between V1 and V2. So these guides will call out, if certain functionality has been removed or replaced. It'll call out, the different behavior or intended design changes in V2 compared to V1, but it may not get into particular, code snippets and things like that. There are some code snippets here, but that's not the primary purpose of this document. This document could be useful to, a product manager, someone who's a business stakeholder, somebody who wants kind of a high level understanding of what's changed and what the business impact might be, or what kind of things they need to be thinking about as they implement V2. This is in contrast to the reference guide. So this is a side-by-side comparison for the most part of what is the equivalent function or feature or method to use in V2 compared to what we had in V1. So this is what any developer or engineer is going to want to use to actually implement their migration and start coding what they had on V1 in V2. So just want to call out the differences in how to use these. And again, these live here in this section, and there's a specific guide for the Web SDK and a specific guide for the REST API. But generally speaking, our V2 platform was designed with, developer experience, usability in mind for an improved experience. And there are new features like app cards and frames, things that we didn't have in V1, which you'll now find in V2. So that is a very quick kind of overview of the main topics for today. So that was the roadmap and migration resources, but typically we'll be using this time for any open questions for people who join. So yeah, it's kind of an open forum for just discussion, chat, if you've got bugs or feature requests, anything like that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Will. On the migration to V2 specifically, on the pieces of the SDK and the API, they're not available on V2 compared to V1. Is there any strategies or any reference for how developers can go around these features that are missing on the new version?
Yeah, that's a good question. It kind of depends feature by feature. Some of them are called out specifically in the comparison guides. Like, I'm trying to think of an example here. Let's see. This is a good example. So some of the architectural changes, like in the API, for example, in V1, there was a more kind of direct way to manage teams and people on boards and things like that. And in V2, specific like users on a board and like user connections, the nomenclature is kind of changed and the architecture is kind of changed. And some of the endpoints that used to be available aren't available anymore. So for this kind of thing, the guide here tries to spell out, what's changed and how you can approach this going forward. But is there a specific kind of feature you're thinking of, Daniel, where it's not in V1 and you kind of want to know what might be the workaround in V2?
No specific feature in mind, but I'm thinking scenario where a developer, their app really depends on one of the features that was removed from V1, right? It's key for the functioning of their app. In that case, what is their path forward? Can they update their app while still in V1? Will there be a deadline for that?
Yeah.
Until the feature is available?
Yeah, good question. So for the most part, V1 is still accessible and will be for some time, at least until the end of the year. And between now and then, our product team is working on closing most, if not all, of the gaps between V2 and V1. There might be certain features that have like very low usage or other metrics that let us know that they weren't being used in V1 and therefore we didn't bring them into V2. But for the most part, anything that's not in V2 yet that was in V1 is something that we're probably working on. Just a couple of examples of that would be like lines and connectors. That was a highly requested one that's been a gap for a while. And that's actually coming out very soon. And it's actually already available in an experimental capacity. But I would say generally, you can continue to use V1 for the next, couple of months if there's a specific feature that's just absolutely not available in V2. But during that time, we'll also be working on making sure that those kinds of things are available in V2 by the time we retire V1.
Right. Thanks for that. And then where's the best place where I can keep up to date with like the stuff that's coming out of V2 that is plugging the gaps from V1? Is there a specific thread on the community, or I just keep an eye on everything?
Yeah, no, another good question. I would say the roadmap is a great place to look at kind of near term, like what's being worked on right now. And then if you check out the feature requests, it's probably a good idea to keep an eye out on the features that have been upvoted the most, because these are what our product team will be, keeping their eyes on and knowing how to prioritize what comes next. Of course, we don't make any guarantees about any of these feature requests, but for ones that are highly requested, they're much more likely to get implemented. And then the other place would be our community. So I'm sure you're familiar, Daniel, but for anyone else out there who might watch this later, this is a great place to keep an eye out on, announcements of things of, gravity, like announcing our developer platform. When we release like lines and connectors, for instance, we'll probably make a post and pin it here. So this is a great place to kind of keep up to date. And of course, this Discord channel as well.
Awesome. Thanks for that.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is the first official developer Q&A. We used to call these office hours, but we're kind of rebranding it and reframing how we, share this time with the community. And the idea is to kind of come with some predefined topics like we did today, discuss the roadmap, migration resources, but more generally, when others are here, it's a time to help unblock people, help with bugs, feature requests, or just general questions, like you had, Daniel.